And a pleasant good afternoon to you. John Verlin once again, On-Demand Advertising Solutions, another digital marketing update. Got an email this past week. A gentleman named Paul in Lawrence says, enjoy listening to your podcasts. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Well, he's wanting to know, how did you base your business model, basically, I guess, when you started out? How did you determine your market, et cetera, et cetera? I seem to struggle kind of with this, as well as the best ways to market my business. Well, Paul, that's a great question. It's really at the center of kind of what I want to talk about today. But I basically, having worked in the past in advertising, knew about small businesses, had seen their struggles, things that they had to do to determine who their customers were for many years, and then also working for a local bank doing their social media and their marketing, their digital marketing as well. Kind of put two and two together and realized that, talking to chamber members of several clubs I belong to, Chamber of Commerce, begin to realize that there is I didn't want the mom and pop type businesses, because a lot of them can do their own social media if they want to. Not a lot are doing it, but at this time at least. But I knew that they could do that themselves. So I was targeting, kind of aiming for more of a medium-sized business. A doctor's office, a law firm, a bank, somebody that had a definite need for marketing, had done marketing, had the budget for it, frankly, but didn't want to spend a lot of money on marketing. As far as, do you want to have an in-house person? Do we want to hire an ad agency or a marketing firm, or do we want something in between? I was kind of shooting for that in between, a business that didn't need 10 people working on their account, say a small ad agency or marketing firm, but just wanted somebody to fill in the gap, to freelance to. That was my niche. That's where I felt I could provide the most value, to save them money on things they necessarily didn't really need, but as far as a larger firm doing it, because many of those you have to sign a long-term monthly or rather a long-term deal to have a basic spend every month, and they may not need that. They may want to, or they want to do it at a lower rate, which is where I saw my niche primarily, that offer value, offer a lower cost to them, but still provide quality product and service that they could get with the larger firm, but they didn't need to spend that much, because they couldn't, a lot of the firms wouldn't take them on because they were too high priced, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that was kind of my target. And the type of business I was looking at were those who have the budget, want to save, don't have the time. They could possibly appoint this to an in-house person to do their daily posts on social media or create content or whatever, but just didn't have the person that they wanted to pay to do it, or that person didn't have the expertise, didn't have the experience. That's one thing that I felt I could really offer, was that experience. So I began to kind of zero in on that. People who obviously, businesses were willing to make the investment and the commitment, and that saw the value in creating their own content. This was a need that I saw with a lot of these chamber people who they had done seminars for the chamber members, and a lot of them were clueless about how to use social media, hadn't even thought about doing their own content. And when I would bring up the idea of podcasting, they were like kind of intrigued with it. And you mentioned animated videos, how that could help, and that was something they had no clue about. Hadn't even thought about it, a number of them. So these were areas I researched before I launched my business, and I'm still tweaking it. I'm still kind of finding my legs, so to speak. But you have to do the research. And this post I came across this past week in Entrepreneur was written by a writer named Brian Roberts about some of the questions every business needs to ask themselves before, they launch their business. We've talked about some of this at some other podcasts we've done, but I want to kind of go into couple of them here that he brought up, as well as sharing you my personal experience in starting my business. Oh, and Paul also, he says here, by the way, do you accept advertising on your blog or in your podcasts? And that, monetizing your blog is a great way to make money. Yeah, Paul, if you are interested, I'm great. I haven't really pursued that because I've had so many irons in the fire here, tied up on other projects. But yeah, shoot me an email. We'll talk about it. But that's one thing I saw as well. Obviously, by targeting content with a blog, you can monetize it, have people sponsor your blog. You can have them run ads in your podcast. I mean, I haven't done that yet, but yeah, if you're interested, shoot me an email. We can talk about it. But these are reasons why I've suggested and recommend these for businesses, because you can not only monetize them, but they're also great for your customers and your prospects is the primary reason. So Brian had some really interesting points here of some basic questions every business needs to ask themselves. Basically, what's your market size? What are your market price points? Now, in my case, I found that a number of marketing firms were, say, 10 to 50 people. And I knew that they had to charge, it could be anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 a month. But I also knew that a lot of the medium-sized business couldn't afford $3,000, $4,000 a month. Maybe $1,000, $2,000 a month or something. So is there something I could put in there to do in that ballpark that's less than a full-fledged ad agency or marketing firm, that yet is still going to give them what they need for reach, traffic, expertise, and content? So that's kind of how I came about how I am positioning my business. And so what Brian's saying is that, by asking these questions in advance, they'll help you target your prospect demographic, what the need in the market is. Is there a need for this? You have to go through that. And he gives a good example here of a gentleman by the name of Max Salentes, who is a e-commerce entrepreneur, and he sells fidget spinners through his brand, Stealth Spinners. Now, during his pre-launch phase, he went through and asked a bunch of these questions for his business. He discovered that the fidget spinner market was huge, but the low end was saturated. And of course, President Trump, I guess, had used one and got them popularized. But he even saw that at supermarkets, all these chains were selling them for $5 a pop at every checkout counter. And he indicated that was a huge red flag, obviously. So what did Mr. Salantes did was to form a high-end collectible market that was untapped, a market that your average fly-by-night entrepreneur and non-committal work ethic person wouldn't find because it wouldn't take the time. He also found a market that a newbie who doesn't ask these type of questions, they wouldn't locate this. He found there was a Facebook community called Spin Space with over 20,000 different hobby enthusiasts. And most of them were avid collectors who were very helpful to people in all stages of collecting. So he found where his potential customers would hang out or congregate. So if you're looking for places to sell the product, these kind of communities are where you need to be and to just jump into, okay? So in my business, I found Chamber of Commerce were a primary source of small businesses. There's also the Center for Small Business at a local community college where a lot of they host lunches and coffees. A lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners hang out at, and that was another group or target that I found as well for my business. But you need to find, where do these people hang out? What are the marketing? Where are the market communities? And who are your market competitors? Because again, it comes down to who is going to compete against you, and how are they going to do it? And you need to do the opposite, or it's something different. Are you going to go for the high-end market, or are you going to go to the low end and jump into all the $5 per deal fidget spinners types? So these are some things that Brian brought up in his post that are really important, and I'm going to kind of summarize in my own words, and that is, first and foremost, determine who's going to be behind your product and service, and why do they want to buy it? What's the need? In my case, in some cases, they didn't even realize they could do some things. And sort of part of that, you got to kind of educate them in the fact that what you offer, they need. Steve Jobs was famous for saying that. He created demand after people didn't realize they needed it. He had to kind of educate them. Determine your market size and the price points. How big is that market? I had a friend kind of give me an honest opinion after reviewing my initial website, and he said, well, John, number one, why are you limiting yourself to Kansas City? Well, yeah, you could offer your service all over the world to businesses. But he also said, people love authenticity. Be down to earth, be real. And I was presenting Kansas City skyline. He said, do something simpler. He said, everybody knows what a stock photograph is. Do your own photos, pictures of yourself or your little home office or whatever it is, because people need to identify with you. You're really selling yourself is what it comes down to. And he gave me some real eye-opening suggestions, some changes to make, which I did. And I'm still, finding my legs, so to speak. But that's why having a mentor or a peer group or somebody that can give honest feedback, because they may totally misunderstand what you're trying to do and you're missing your market. And it may take some tweaks to your website or to your information or your pricing to find that niche. And that's why you need good feedback. So what is the need in the market? Have you done surveys? Have you asked prospects or talked to people in Chamber of Commerce or at farmers markets? Have you tested in any of these areas to see what the need of the market is? Now, in my case, I knew there were a lot of these new platforms. And one thing Paul indicates here, he said, I saw some of your ads. I appreciated the fact that they were straightforward and simple, not like these copy and paste Facebook marketers that I'm sick of seeing on my Facebook feed. I know what you're saying, Paul. I've seen them too, and they're promising things that sound unbelievable, blah, 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 and I understand that. And that's one reason the authenticity is so important, to be real, be yourself, because a lot of these guys probably do copy and paste other people's content and stuff, and it gets all over the place, and it can get very frustrating. So that authenticity is critical. So the market communities we mentioned here, finding where they hang out, your prospects, and then who your market competitors are. Looking into that and doing what they're not doing. I specialize podcasting for a number of reasons, animated videos to engage and stand out. I've added web design because I've had a few people ask me about that because they liked, I guess, my website and wanted something simple but effective. And so I've added some things. I've focused on some things that others aren't doing. Again, it comes down to doing what the other person isn't doing, but at the same time being competitive. That competition is right there, and it needs to be front and center in whatever it is you're doing. So, Paul, thank you for the question. I hope I've answered that in some form or another here that'll kind of help you out. But these are some good points of knowing in advance, getting answers to these things through your research, doing the work that the average Joe won't do because they're looking at their business as a hobby and not a serious business. But again, at some point you need to jump and say, I'm just going to jump into this thing and do it. I've got the research. You're going to be tweaking it along the way as well. Cash flow is another big thing as you start to get business. Keep in mind that you want to get paid up front. However you're going to do that, you've got to have cash flow. You can get small business loans, a number of platforms now that can do that, as well as a local bank, that kind of thing. But bottom line is that keep in mind, knowing who your market is, what you're offering, is there a need for it, and having cash flow are some of the most critical things you can do prior to going into launching a new venture or business. John Verlin 12 at AT&T.net is my email for questions, comments. Want to know if you want to sponsor something, I don't know. And OnDemandAdvertisingSolutions.com is the website, and we'll talk to you soon.